Well, hello there. I am Michael Osinski.
And I am Tyler Esselman.
And you are listening to This One Goes to 11. What is it, Tyler? Tell them.
This One Goes to 11 is a podcast, in case you weren't aware. It is the podcast where Michael and I open up the room for a friend of ours, a family member, a colleague, a member of our community, to make their case and die on the hill for what they believe is a perfect album.
So perfect, in fact, that 10 out of 10 just isn't good enough.
Nuh-uh. Never
where
has been.
that expression, die on a hill, where that came from specifically.
Yep, you bet.
I don't know. We're not etymologists, folks. We don't know. We don't know the other No. Well, Tyler, who do we got this week?
This week, I'm excited about this week. This felt like new territory for us, and our guests brought the heat, as we are so lucky that all of our guests do. But this conversation went to all kinds of great places. We talked to Ellie McElvain. Ellie is a friend of mine here in Los Angeles. She is a freelance writer, a comedian, and a host of her own podcast called What's Your Favorite Taylor Swift Song?, which might give you a little peek into who we're talking about today.
It's REO Speedwagon, right?
Yeah, it is. We can't. This has all been a big bait and switch. Sorry, Swifties.
I'm gonna keep on loving you. I'm impressed.
Those songs can't be argued with, but we are talking about Miss Taylor Swift today.
Yeah.
And we broke form a little bit. We talked about kind of went in a different direction than ours usually do, and I think in a really satisfying way.
Well, this is someone who feels really passionate about the album and the artist. And I mean, pretty much everyone we've had on is passionate about music in some ways. But I think, I don't know, I was impressed by her case and impressed by her conviction, frankly.
Totally. And I think she is somebody who is also very used to convincing other people. Not that it's her job or anything, but I do think she is well practiced at convincing people of Taylor Swift's quality. So she came prepared with a genuine argument, whereas many other people just sort of lay their argument out in not so strong or forceful a manner. She really laid some lines down in the sand, which I appreciated. Yeah,
no judgment to our other guests.
This is a great, she really brought it.
Well, let's cut the chit chat, Tyler. Let's get right to the episode.
Yes, let's chat. Ellie McElvain, welcome to This One Goes to 11. Honored to have you, our resident Taylor Swift expert.
Thank you.
Yeah. How are you today?
I would say, people have jokingly said that about me, but I do think if there's one thing I'm a subject matter expert on, it is this.
Yeah. Yeah. This is something I know. It's one of the fundamental. We have not known each other very long, nor have we delved deep into our other interests. But this is something that I completely characterize with you. So I think it's
the brand is strong.
The brand is strong with you. So you have listened to the podcast a little bit, so you know that we have our guest introduce the album that they are going to be making their case for in front of the This One Goes to 11 tribunal. What album have you brought before us today to make its case for perfection?
Oh, Tyler, I have brought you Taylor Swift's 2012 masterpiece, iconic, Red, specifically the re-release. So it's Red, Taylor's version, which came out this last year, November 2021, to great critical acclaim. Just a wellspring of attention. She was dominating the cultural conversation for basically that entire month, if not 2 or 3. It's one of the best albums ever before it got re-released, and unbelievably, everything that she added in the re-release brought it to an even higher plane that made it an instant classic in my mind, and I think in many minds. I don't think I'm alone in this.
It has moved some units. As much as units actually move anymore, people have listened to this album. Looking at the sheer volume of listens on Spotify is actually mind blowing for how many people Like,
yeah,
I think she's probably the most listened to artist we have talked about on this podcast.
On this podcast,
yeah,
probably
so, yeah.
because the list of who's more listened to than her,
short.
You know, even regardless of what kind of metric we're using, streaming numbers, album sales, etc. There's only maybe a few people above her, even on the larger scale, not even on the more micro scale of who you've covered on this podcast.
Right.
I think she has the 9th most listeners on Spotify is where the last time I looked at the stats.
Which is also not a completely perfect reflection of her actual listenership, because for years she had completely pulled her music from Spotify
Exactly.
and streaming in general, because she was fighting for artists' rights to get paid, compensated at least a little more fairly than what was happening in the beginning of the music streaming sort of renaissance.
Yeah, she's kind of a case study in it. Her and she's one. Okay, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Okay,
I was going to say you're already stealing some of my facts.
I'm stealing the things. We have Ellie. We have a segment on the podcast for those listeners who may not be so familiar with the artist's work or the album itself, where we give them a little update. We give them a little context about what this album is, who this person is, and what we will be talking about today. We call it the Beginner's Guide to Red, Taylor's Version by Taylor Swift in 60 seconds. And my good friend Michael is going to be undertaking that challenge today. You will have the opportunity to judge him on how he does. Okay. Because the points matter a lot. I hope you know that. So, Michael, are you ready to give your recap?
I am so ready. Here we go.
Ready? 3, 2, 1, and go.
Named after singer-songwriter James Taylor, Taylor Swift was born in West Reading, Pennsylvania, to a stockbroker and a mutual fund marketing executive. She started out as a musical theater kid, but after listening to Shania Twain, she shifted her focus to country music and made more frequent trips to Nashville, releasing her first album in 2006 and opening for Brad Paisley in 2007. Red, her 4th studio album, and her first to explicitly and somewhat controversially go beyond the country pop genre, topped the Billboard charts and went platinum 7 times over. Recently, due to a dispute over the ownership of her masters, she has begun re-recording her first 6 studio albums and released Red, Taylor's Version, in late 2021, complete with a 10-minute version of the single All Too Well. She's got almost 58 million monthly listeners on Spotify, which is ironic considering that she removed all her music from the platform for almost 3 years to protest the lack of adequate compensation being provided to recording artists. She's won the Grammy for Album of the Year 3 times, and she's got a new album coming out later this week.
Ooh, baby.
Oh, God, hot dog.
Hot dog is right. Well done.
All right, I'm nervous. I'm nervous to go before you, Ellie, with that little summary. I feel like I don't know. How did I do?
Honestly, 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10.
I'll take
9
that.
out of 10.
Really,
really well done. It's very hard. I mean, I'm sure this is the case for many artists who have long careers with excellent albums, but very hard to put her into 60 seconds. And so I'd say you did a really good job with that. I just think you could have been a little bit more effusive. A little bit more color.
Okay.
I love it.
You could have kissed the ring a little bit more. She is a queen.
Oh goodness.
Okay.
I'm just
noted.
9 out of 10 is really good. What is that? That's an A. Minus.
9 out of 10, 90%. So 9 out of 10 to start it with only a point being missed for effusiveness. I think we're off to a good start.
On a purely journalistic level, it's a 10 out of 10. But I'm a fangirl. I gotta go hard.
Well, I think it's a good way of transitioning probably into, you say you are a fangirl and you say you claim that title. So what does that? Let's start the conversation with that. That's not how we usually start our conversations, but let's start from that place of like when and how did you become a fangirl of Taylor Swift?
So I think fan behavior and fandom is a crucial part of understanding the entire tapestry of what it means to like love and appreciate Taylor Swift and pop music at large. For me, fandom was crucial to my health, happiness, and just like journey through life. Music is important to a lot of people. I'm not claiming that that's special to me, but there is a particular element to being part of a active community that has sort of a fully entrenched with the same obsession and the same level of care and attention to one particular artist or perhaps a boy band. I would also consider myself a fangirl for One Direction and Harry Styles and whatnot. But when I was in high school, I always loved pop music growing up, but my parents had very cool music taste, like Wilco and Radiohead. And I was raised on, quote unquote, good music, things that Pitchfork would like, and I definitely appreciated that. And I have an appreciation for that type of, cultural music culture in my childhood. But I also loved Britney Spears and Backstreet Boys. And I felt like I was never fully empowered to enjoy it on the same level as quote unquote serious artists or better music. And then as I entered puberty, I was so affected by wanting boys to like me and wanting to seem cool and wanting to seem like I had good taste. And so I completely pushed all of my love for pop music and pop artists down into a compressed little compartmentalized box, and it was like it didn't exist for me. I didn't go to an exciting pop concert in my entire teenage years. I think the last pop concert I had gone to was like Jesse McCartney at a mall when I was 12.
Oh my goodness.
And then from then on it was like, I want people to think I'm cool. I want boys to think I'm cool. I'm very affected by their taste. And like, what is their taste? Green Day? How cool is that? But
I think a lot of times it's Wilco and Radiohead, incidentally. I think
truly.
Especially living in the Midwest. Yeah.
Yeah, my mom's such a pick-me. She just likes Wilco and Radiohead.
Well,
they're slowly becoming dad rock, I feel like, now, though.
They are, yeah.
I know.
Because the boys.
They are so good, though. It's okay. That's okay with them. And I think that's okay with Jeff Tweedy, to be honest.
I think he'd accept that, yeah.
He's a real dad.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and then when I got to college, I, in many ways we all blossom in college, but one of the things that happened to me was severe depression, academic anxiety, and spiraling out. And one of the few things that sort of kept me grounded and happy and not wanting to die was listening to, rediscovering my love for Taylor Swift, which had been dormant through high school. I listened to her albums when I was in high school, but I never would have publicly claimed her. And then when I got to college, Red came out my sophomore year of college.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was a actual enlightenment awakening for me to become my truest self again. It felt like through my fandom of Taylor Swift and concurrently also, but we can't get into it, One Direction as well.
I think we can touch on that. I think it's relevant to it's part of that sphere for sure. Let me give you some points though, because again, points really matter. 500 points for reaching an enlightenment in 2012.
Thank you.
With this album. It's pretty good if you're reaching enlightenment at that point. Come on.
I know. I'm fully transcended. Ask me anything. I have the answer.
See your aura. Yeah, your
aura.
I
am the rock in the creek. Water flows around me.
You are at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have self-actualized.
You've actualized.
I actually don't need to eat food. I let the sun nourish me.
Crystals.
It's good for the
crystals. No, but yeah. So I think my experience also mirrors a lot of people's experience, particularly young women. And really connecting with Taylor Swift on a personal, intense level is not new to me. That is sort of the way that she hooks people. And so I would say being a fangirl and the fan experience of being a Swiftie, a Taylor Swift fan, is a very unique thing that is hard to fully put into words, honestly. A lot of times fandoms are, very sort of boiled down to screaming girls being irrational, right? But guess who were the irrational screaming girls? The OGs it's the Beatlemania, so this is not new. This has been around for a long time. And I do think Taylor Swift is one of the savviest artists who has ever completely engaged with that concept and nurtured it and fed it and loved it. and made an entire world of lore and mythology in the Taylor Swift cinematic universe that makes it very satisfying to be a super fan.
Yep, we'll say 65 points for the Taylor Swift cinematic universe, because it is that. It is that for sure. Let me ask you, I was, in preparing for this one, in preparing for this episode, there was a little bit of, in reading about her origins and reading about her signing to this label as such a young girl, as a young woman. And they kind of, a lot of different sources that I was looking at said that they felt like at that point, the teenage girls who listened to country music was an untapped market. And I thought that was so interesting, because I feel like that wouldn't have been something that I would expect to be identified as an untapped market. I feel like maybe that's just because I'm so used to Taylor's presence in that, in that particular slice of the genre for so long. But was that something, were you listening to country music, or like, I guess genre is a ongoing conversation on this podcast, but like, how do you feel her as a country artist has led her to become what she is today? Do you feel like she's kind of created her own genre? How does that exist for you?
Yeah, and I do really like the way that you pointed that out. I think that you being surprised that country music had an untapped market in teenage girls, that surprise comes from the entire cultural shift that happened in a post-Taylor Swift world. No one would think that anymore, because she so dominated the industry through that genre initially, that for a long time she was the biggest best-selling country artist, full stop, not even for a particular demographic, full stop.
And writing songs for other country artists too.
Yeah. And so for me, growing up, country music was not like, we hate country music. That wasn't the vibe, I love Dolly Parton. I love, various classics. But it wasn't my go-to. I grew up in a suburb outside of Chicago. There wasn't a big country music culture there. And so Taylor Swift coming into my life was probably the first time I was ever seriously engaged with country music in like a full body way, in a way where I was like, this rules, So they were right. And she did do that. I think that her growth, her entry point as a country musician, was what made the most logical sense for her at that time. She was entering the music industry through Nashville. Her like core writing style and, these kind of cornerstone ways that she builds song and story is very country in nature. Country is very storytelling. It's very, taking the personal, making it adaptable to a lot of people. And, there's definitely an emphasis on beautiful lyricism in country. And so for her to enter through that way was definitely a good entry point to her. I think that she is, a voracious listener and a true musician who basically is unable to stop creating music and wanting to experiment with that. So as someone who was also developed a really strong business sense from the get-go and had a really strong sense of brand and image and star power, and quickly became not only a musician but a celebrity too, which is a whole bag of tricks, I think she would have experimented a lot more with genre earlier if she felt like she could, but the crossover process is very complicated. So she was always writing pop music or pop country from the beginning. So the transition from country to pop made the most sense. And that you really see that happen on this album, Red, the strongest. That's when she has literal dubstep on a song, It's cool.
Yeah. Fun fact, my first concert ever, Taylor Swift, opening for Brad Paisley, 2007.
What? Oh my God. Yeah. That is a real amazing thing to have. Not a lot of people were there.
No, yeah. It was, well, the funny thing was that she was the first opener, and then Kelly Pickler of American Idol fame.
Classic Kelly Pickler.
Was after her. And then Brad Brad, obviously. My mom it was and is still really into Brad Paisley, so that was why we ended up
He's
there.
good.
But that was fully like this teardrops on my guitar sort of, I think her visual style is so striking too, right? That back then the sundress, the acoustic guitar kind of thing was so her for that era, and she's pivoted so strongly into this sort of like more like glamour, like global pop star thing. It's kind of like she's defined it in many ways for this era. So I agree with that. And so when I think back to that day, and obviously it's a long time ago, so I don't remember it shot for shot, but it was a very different Taylor at that time than we know today.
Yeah, but then in many ways the same Taylor. One thing that I will say is so much has been made of her genre shifting and switching and crossovers, and from country music to pop music, with Red being the transition point, 1989 being the pop album. And then I think recently with the Folklore and Evermore albums in 2020, she has crossed over into yet another category of almost indie singer-songwriter sort of. I mean, I wouldn't call it folk music, but yeah, I don't know. She's entering a different realm too there. She just wants to make music, and I think she wants to experiment as much as possible and let herself do that. So
yeah, you get 300 points for still the same Taylor, by the way.
Thanks.
Why do you think that people got so cranky about her crossing over into a different genre? Because I just think about how, more recently when, Lil Nas X had Old Town Road, which was on the country chart for a little while, and then they were like, no, this isn't country anymore, and they eliminated it. And just everyone got all so cranky about it. I guess, I mean, maybe there's two questions there. Why did they get so cranky? And how are you supposed to define country music anyway? And I guess the third question is, does it even matter?
If there's a banjo and you talk about a truck, that's country music.
Yeah.
No, I think in many ways, people who are super protective of genre and labels in music, it's a lot like people who are really into like dog breeding, like if we just let all these mutts, mate with each other, we're not going to have golden retrievers anymore, No disrespect to people who actually have Southern accents. I'm being a monster, but you know what I mean? Like people who are very obsessed with the essential nature of certain categories, that these things move and change. And what's really true at the core of a lot of genre conversation is things that seem totally irrelevant to music, but obviously impact it, which is, socioeconomic things, race. There's so much to be said about the rhythm and blues category and the urban music categories and things like that. I mean, that came into huge conversation with that Lil Nas X moment. I'm a huge Lil Nas X fan. Check the Instagram for my industry baby themed Halloween costume last year. But when
90 points for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When he put out a country rap song and Billboard made the decision, or people were salty. People were, what did you say? Grumpy.
Real salty. They were cranky. They were super cranky.
They're cranky about it because, people want to maintain what they know. They don't like change, right? This is a classic thing we see all over the place. And so that's one of the things that is hard about being a famous person, being a musician, being anyone who wants to be flexible and fluid in any way. That's why people are really awful about trans people and the evolving languages we have about gender and identity and sexuality, because it's not what they grew up with. It's not what they're used to. So it's scary. And then they're mean,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So luckily, the conversation about Taylor Swift's genre switching or shifting or fluidity doesn't have as high of stakes as when those conversations happen about gender and identity and stuff. But I do think that like reaction point comes from the same psychological place of, oh, that's not what I know. I want these things to all sound this way. I want these things to all sound this way. I don't want, and never the twain shall meet,
Totally.
Which is crazy because music does that all the time.
Oh yeah, exactly. Have you read? I'm going to butcher this name, but have you read the book "Major Labels" by Khalifa Sena? I'm pretty sure.
No, but I've been told I have to.
Yeah, I've gotten like halfway through it. It's the official title, "Major Labels: A History of Popular Music in 7 Genres," and I've tried to start reading it 3 times, not because I haven't finished it, just because my library loan has expired. But a lot of the things you're saying about genre and the reason that genre exists, he outlines in the book. The fact that it's not even really meant to while maybe at one point it may have been meant to define a particular sound, it's become something a lot more, associated with capitalism and exclusion, is what essentially genre classifications have turned into.
Yeah, and not to get too far off on a tangent, but there was all of this hoopla about Dolly Parton finally getting nominated to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. And for years, like decades, people have been bothered that Dolly Parton had not been extended an invitation to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Lo and behold, and she's already in the Country Hall of Fame, the Opry.
Grand Ole Opry,
right? She's already been honored to high heavens about that. But people were like, why not? She's a damn rock star. I will always love you, blah, 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 blah. She's the best. Mm-hmm. And she obviously is. She gets nominated to be inducted. She declines because she does not feel like a rock musician. Mm-hmm. And what's funny, I have a friend who has a podcast all about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, so I know a lot about this. It's funny because the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is a great representation of the very mind-bending elements of like what is genre, what is rock and roll, and there's so many conversations that get sparked by that in terms of like who gets inducted into this silly little Hall of Fame. Yeah.
We, as a matter of fact, Michael and I and our friend Ashlyn made a pilgrimage there a few years ago to Cleveland, the Mistake by the Lake. Sorry, all of our Clevelanders, all of our Cleveland residing or Cleveland origin people that might be listening. But it was a hell of a place, and we were there because Pearl Jam was being inducted, and we wanted to go check it out. And I just feel like you're right that there is so much in there. It is a great document. I guess it's a great collection of everything that rock can be. And I also think when you think about somebody who is, I love when you say like, oh, that's rock and roll. I know it's kind of like a sort of corny thing to say now, like in context now, but like saying, oh, that's so rock and roll used to mean something different than it does now, right? Like it meant anti-establishment, or it meant like something that was trying to break form, something that was trying to try something new. So I would argue, and it sounds like you might agree with this, that Dolly is pretty rock and roll at her core. Yeah. Because what's more rock and roll than saying thanks but no thanks to being inducted right? Into something?
That was cool. I would love to have known what the internal thought process was about that for Dolly, because I'm sure she had plenty of people being like, no, it's fine, you can do this. So it's funny that she really drew the line in the sand about wanting to remove herself from consideration. So Taylor Swift is absolutely going to be first year eligible, first year inductee.
I think so too.
Yeah. I think she's a pop star, right? So, I mean, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has had a ton of pop stars. So
I wonder what year they'll consider her, because it's supposed to be, I think, 25 years after the first album. But I wonder if there'll be a weird genre thing, if maybe they won't consider her until after her first pop album or something like that. I don't know, but
they're not even supposed to be doing pop stars; they're supposed to be doing rock stars. It's all silly.
Yeah, it is silly.
I do like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame though.
It's a great museum. I love it. Cool, it's really cool.
I love the spectacle. I love unclear rules.
We love pageantry. Pageantry is a great thing. Sidebar that is relevant to this also is Mariah Carey's forthcoming grunge album.
Yes,
I saw
Very
that.
excited about this.
Let's go.
like what a cool thing. So for those of you who are listening out there who aren't up on Mariah Carey's recent news, again, not to go too far on a tangent, but apparently when she was recording in the 90s, in the spare time to blow off steam when they were working really hard on the Mariah album, and I say that in quotes, like the one that she was getting set to release through her label, they just recorded a bunch of grunge songs because grunge was hip happening at the time, and I guess she was inspired by it, and I'm fascinated to find out what that sounds like.
Me too.
I can't even conceive of it.
Me too. And I mean, that I do think this is relevant back to Taylor Swift because Mariah Carey is a truly excellent musician. Truly excellent.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And
A1.
I read her memoir. She's amazing on so many levels. So she's definitely on a Taylor Swift level to me in terms of talent and output, and her story is crazy. But when someone is, on a genius level with being a musician, with making art, I want to see them do that in every version that they want to give us, So I am so pro switching genres, trying new things, being wild with it, being free, do shrooms, touch touch the grass and decide to go a different way,
150 points for all of the genre talk we've been having. Screw genre. That's what you get 150 points for.
Thanks.
Who cares about it?
So, Ellie, we asked you to choose your standout track from this album. I wonder if you could tell our listeners what you've chosen and why.
I have chosen All Too Well, the 10-minute version. This is a extended version of the original All Too Well track that was released on Red in 2012. We got the 10-minute version in this 2021 re-release Taylor's version. This has been a song that was a legend, a myth in the Taylor Swift fandom for almost a decade. There was a one-off interview where Taylor Swift mentions randomly, this is pre the Taylor's version release, that the original version of All Too Well ran about 10 minutes long when she was first conceiving of it. And All Too Well was already a cult favorite amongst fans. It was a deep cut. It was not a single. It's a ballad. It's long. It's sad. And this song took off privately, personally, on an individual basis, and quickly became known as her masterpiece. Really her pièce de résistance. It topped the charts in terms of rankings about her, very much through, I believe, a fan-generated hype about this particular deep-cut album track off of a already very long album. So All Too Well is basically the perfect picture of what it means to mourn and reflect back on nostalgically a relationship that has ended. You're not over it. You're trying to be, and every emotion that encompasses. And the way that it viscerally feels when you're listening to it, especially in a car driving, and then doubly, especially in a group of people who are all screaming it at the top of their lungs, there's nothing like it in the world. Like, I have goosebumps on my arm right at this moment, thinking about the times that I've listened to it and screamed the lyrics and felt them to my core at various stages of my life, of various times when I've been happy or sad or in between. And I do think this song is the perfect in-between song of looking back and looking forward on something that harmed you. And the 10-minute version is my standout track over the original. And normally I would say I love editing. I love getting down to the meat of what is actually good. I think Kill Your Darlings, always. Not in this case. Every extra verse that got added to this is, oh my God, more chills. It's phenomenal. And the first we hear of a new verse, it's pretty early on. It has this famous "fuck the patriarchy" line that, can be cringy in some ways or whatever, but it's immediately grabs you. We're in a new world. We're in this 10-minute extended universe version of All Too Well. And when you listen to it as a fan who has listened to the original hundreds, if not thousands of times, the 10-minute version becomes this brand new not to use tech language, but like user experience of those new verses come and you are fully energized again. So the entire 10-minute song flies by because you love and remember the original, the OG lyrics and verses and bridges. And then you get these new pieces that hit just as strong. There are some incredibly standout lyrics. I'm sure we can go into that later. But at the end of the day, All Too Well 10-minute version is a testament to the masterwork of what it means to be a songwriter for Taylor Swift.
Damn. Okay. Yeah, you get 150 points for that for sure.
Thanks. Was that too long? I could be effusive.
No. That was great.
That's me being effusive.
No.
Well, in the interest of listeners, you should listen to the whole thing because it's definitely worth the ride. Let's let them get into that. Listeners, this is the 10-minute version of All Too Well, and we'll talk a little bit more about it on the way back. That's the end of part 1. If you access this episode via our YouTube playlist, you're about to hear our guest's standout track. If you'd like to jump ahead to part 2, you'll find a link in the description of this episode.